Donald Trump has slammed Mayor of New York City Bill de Blasio as a communist fool who has destroyed New York and doesn't know what he's doing, as more residents flee for good and say the city will never be the same again. It's an interesting insult to Donald Trump, and I've actually got to say, while it may be an insult, it's not necessarily wrong, but I'll tell you what I think is wrong. Trump, you're wrong. Now hear me out. Trump, you're wrong. You know why? Bill de Blasio knows exactly what he's doing. He actually said it. He said he wants to buy up these empty properties and convert them into affordable housing. And Bill de Blasio has a history of rather far left policy ideas. And there's actually an article in the New York Times talking about how Bill de Blasio is a communist. Okay, I don't know. I know a lot of people will, accuse him of being a communist. They'll probably say he's not. The SBA, it's the police union, I guess, in New York City, slammed him for quoting Karl Marx. I think he was quoting Marx and then criticizing the idea. But we have this article from the New York Times I want to get to. But first, let's just talk about what's happening with New York City. The gist of what I'm trying to get to is, I've long said I think that de Blasio and Cuomo are hurting New York on purpose, simply because we have stories like this. De Blasio reveals he wants to buy empty New York City buildings and turn them into affordable housing. Well, that sounds like everything he's doing is deliberate. So for those that may have missed the previous context from other videos about the cities, you've got checkpoints, $10,000 fines, 14-day quarantine. This basically makes sure there's no tourism. He's putting homeless people in luxury neighborhood hotels at taxpayer expense. So people are fleeing en masse. And I've covered quite a bit of these stories about how people feel New York City is dying. Let me read to you a bit about the criticism here and what Trump is saying. I think you get the idea of what Trump is saying, but let's see what's going on with this story from the Daily Mail. They say Trump slammed Bill de Blasio as he was interviewed over the phone on Fox and Friends on Monday morning. The president said New York City has been gradually declining over de Blasio's watch over the last 4 years. And that's true, as far as I understand. I mean, I left a few years ago. Crime, particularly shootings, has shot up recently, and the NYPD is having resources taken away. The Sergeants Benevolent Association, the largest NYPD union, has endorsed Trump for re-election. Now, apparently, there's like a really big deal that this, I'm not sure if it was the SBA, it may have been, but Trump got endorsed by a police union that hasn't made an endorsement in like 40 years. It's a serious deal. Last week, there were more than 60 shootings across New York City that left 76 people injured and 14 killed. The number is 2.5 times more than the same week in 2019 and is among other rising crime stats. While crime rises, the culture that brought millions to the city continues to disintegrate, coupled with the fact that businesses are now operating with entire remote workforces. Many are asking, what's the point of living in the city? What the point of living in the city even is? I completely agree. And that's one of the reasons I left, for sure. I mean, I work digitally. I've been thinking about this for a while. My whole operation is remote. I complain to the internet and record audio and then upload it to the internet. You can get access to it basically anywhere. It's actually a cool story. When I was in Fukushima, Japan, like everything's shut down as a total disaster area because it's where the nuclear disaster hit. I was playing Hearthstone, the video game on my phone, thinking about how cool it is that you can basically connect to the network anywhere. So why should people come back to New York even if it was being managed properly? And that is a big challenge for de Blasio, to be fair. But I got to admit, when I look at everything that's going on in New York City with this hysterical mass shutdown, I got to say, I believe it's intentional. And maybe it's because Bill de Blasio actually is a communist fool, as Trump says. President Trump slammed Bill de Blasio as a communist fool who destroyed New York City on Monday morning as more residents flee. They say many fled New York in March when it was the epicenter of the pandemic with the intention of returning. But as the lockdown dragged on, forcing hundreds of businesses to close their doors, and as businesses survived with their remote workforce, many abandoned their apartments. In recent weeks, crime has shot up and homelessness is spraying across the city. The NYPD's largest union, SBA, has taken the unorthodox step of formally endorsing Trump because cops are so frustrated with de Blasio's handling of the city. Here's what you got to understand about cops. Cops have friends. Cops have families. Cops have parents. Cops have kids. These people all vote. Each and every one of these cops in New York City, of which I believe there's like 30 to 40,000. Now just estimate their extended families about 5. You got a couple 100,000 people right there being directly impacted by what's going on with these cops and the failure of this city. They say in June, DeBlasio stripped the NYPD of $1 billion in response to Black Lives Matter protesters. Trump has vowed to revitalize the city if he wins the November election, but he hasn't yet explained how. DeBlasio remains in power until November 2021. He cannot be reelected. Good. On Monday morning, the president phoned into Fox and Friends to discuss a range of issues. He said, the mayor has no response. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's a fool. Now, I think Trump is playing it safe here. I mean, he did call him a communist fool, but I think he's playing it safe because, in my opinion, I mean, you look at this photo. Protesters are stopping cars and threatening them in Manhattan over the weekend. I'm hearing stories. Man, these photos are mind blowing. I'm hearing stories that in Times Square, they're chasing cars. There's people just in the street, just randomly chasing cars. Bill de Blasio knows what he's doing. I mean, listen, I don't believe that it's all necessarily some grand conspiracy that Bill de Blasio has some kind of like long-term plan. He's called that. Nothing like that. I think Bill de Blasio is absolutely influenced by his time in South America. We can see the story from the New York Times. A mayoral hopeful now, de Blasio was once a young leftist from September 22nd, 2013. The scruffy young man who arrived in Nicaragua stood out. They say that he was basically, look at this. Mr. de Blasio studied Latin American politics at Columbia and was conversational in Spanish, grew to be an admirer of Nicaragua's ruling Sandinista party, thrusting himself into one of the most polarizing issues in American politics at the time. The Reagan administration denounced the Sandinistas as tyrannical and communist, while their liberal backers argued that after years of dictatorship, they were building a free society with broad access to education, land, and healthcare. Today, Mr. de Blasio is critical of the Sandinistas' crackdown on dissenters, but said he learned from his time trying to help the Central American country. So I'm going to be totally reasonable, I guess. I don't think Bill de Blasio is an outright authoritarian communist, a tanky or anything like that. I think Bill de Blasio is far left. I think he leans authoritarian, and I think he knows what he's doing in the sense that his view of how to run New York City is completely shaped by his youth dealing with these far left, arguably communist governments. He's seen their plans. That's how he views the world. And to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So when you get a crisis like this, Bill de Blasio does what he knows best, what he learned from his time experiencing these things, which means ultimately you have homeless people being placed in these luxury hotels at taxpayer expense. You've got just simple leftist policy. This is another thing I want to show you from 2019. Mayor wants a vacancy tax for empty storefronts. Vacant storefront windows throughout New York City are an urban blight. And with traditional retail being such a tough market, they're becoming more common. Mayor Bill de Blasio has a plan to solve this. While in Albany, the mayor called for the passage of a commercial vacancy tax. What this would do is force retail locations from keeping their properties empty or holding out for higher paying long-term tenants. I understand the idea, but you have to understand this is a leftist idea, punitive taxing to force the public to do things or over threat of taking more money from them. Bill de Blasio may not be a communist, but so I'll tell you this. Trump's insult, okay, but he knows what he's doing. I saw these photos. This is why, I know I've done a bunch of segments talking about the destruction of our cities, but I got to show you. This is like kind of one of those, you ever see an old sitcom where they do a flashback episode? These photos are nuts. Check this out. You got garbage all over the streets. They say last week, more than 60 shootings, police tape everywhere. You got the video and photos of the random people running through the streets, attacking vehicles. You've got this. Homeless encampments are popping up all over the city. Pictured one of the encampments in Lower Manhattan. Think about what's happening right now. Check it out. Rich people left, right? Bill de Blasio then says he wants to buy up these buildings. Then middle class and poor people are forced out of their apartments because they have no more money. They get evicted or for just one reason or another end up on the street or just, homeless. Bill de Blasio then says, I'll tell you what, we will put you up in the new building we just bought. Now these people live in government housing, and it's all just happening before our eyes. I want to be fair. I'm not saying that Bill de Blasio made it all happen. COVID literally happened. I think, though, he's definitely taking advantage. And I think, like I said, his worldview is shaped by communism. So he's going to do what he knows best. Look at this, man. This is crazy to me. Outside Citibank right here, it says homeless people in New York City on August 14th. Some residents say they no longer want to stay in New York because the homeless population is growing and becoming more aggressive. He's a socialist, communist, maybe he's a fool. He got rid of some of the most talented policemen that there are in the world, and that includes looking for very bad things all beyond New York. I don't know what he means specifically. Some of those people are gone, and that's no good. No, this is a fool. This is a fool. He said of DeBlasio, crime has shot up in recent weeks, particularly shootings. There were more than 60 shootings across New York City in the last week, leaving 76 people injured. Trump said on Monday, look at the shootings. When I left New York 4 years ago, New York was. I could see the seeds of this because he's been a bad mayor, but New York was good. It was okay. It all happened recently. It all came together. All of this over a period of years, and he's been mayor, but about a year, and then 6 months ago, it's incredible what happened. Yeah. Most of you, many of you probably know this. I lived on that street where those two cops got executed. I lived there, man. I look out my window and I see what's going on. I walk over. There's a vehicle, these two cops, a black identity extremist walked up with a gun, shot an Asian and a Latino officer, just bang, bang. Then he ran to the subway. I think he killed himself. I actually still have a piece of the police tape from that scene. It was right in front of my house. I saw it laying on the ground. I picked it up and I was like, man, it's something that represents that moment. I ended up deciding to move down to Miami because I was working for Fusion at the time. I was like, I got to get out of this place, man. And it felt like a good opportunity to get closer to the company and try and, do more and expand. But the company was just horribly mismanaged. I went down there for a year, decided to move back, but this time to New Jersey to stay out of New York City because of how bad it was. And while I was in Jersey, just on the other side of the river, bombs were planted in New York. And I'm thinking to myself, you got this unrest, these protests are happening, and I moved further and further away. Now I moved further south. And you know what? I feel like I'm always one step ahead of where everything ends up. Now the riots have hit the cities, so I'm glad I'm not there anymore. They've gone to the neighborhoods in some areas. I'm glad I'm not in New York and around that area, Chicago. Now I'm moving to more rural areas because once again, I think what we're seeing in all these cities, it's not so much like it's a plan, but when you have an ever far left Democratic Party, which is what we're seeing, they view everything through this lens. They have simplistic answers, and they believe they're more powerful than natural forces. 100%. I am not a laissez-faire capitalist kind of guy. I like a mixed market. But I do believe that, economically leaning slightly to the right, like we are, you let the market sort of help out. The government, in my opinion, should sort of referee to a certain extent, and there should be some social programs. But for the most part, you let the businesses do what the business got to do. You let the machine churn because this is a capitalist economy. Okay, it's a decentralized network of people deciding what resources they need and where they need to apply them. As COVID hits, we saw truly the most devastating effect of command economy. The government saying, shut it all down is the perfect example of a command economy where an executive or a party just decides this is what we do. And that's New York. And that's all these Democrat states. And so I'll tell you this, man, I'm probably going to step back from, advocating. I've always been a bit of a milquetoast fence sitter, right? So that's the joke. But I still have believed in some left-wing policies. Now I'm just going to shut up. You know why? You look at these red states, they doing okay. South Dakota, they rejected Trump's stimulus, the $400 unemployment boost. We don't need it. Things are actually doing great. Jobs are back. GDP is slightly up. Sorry, thanks, but no thanks. Appreciate the offer. All these blue states, chaos, calamity, collapse. So, I'll respect Trump when he says it, that this guy's a communist. And that leads me to this very difficult position. There's a common trope. Actually, you guys might be familiar with Ryan Long. He's the comedian who made that really funny woke and racist thing where they have the shirts and they agree on everything. He just put out another one where you have two guys who are one's on the left and one's on the right. And the guy on the left is just going nuts. And the guy on the right is like, just why don't you come over here and play with me? And he's just acting totally chill and normal. And that's how things are basically happening. In these red states and cities, for the most part, they're saying, okay, do your thing, I guess. We'll try our best. In these blue cities and blue states, they're basically, putting on an iron gauntlet, slamming their fist down and dictating. And it's not working. The edict isn't working. The lockdowns aren't working. They're destroying everything around them. Meanwhile, the Sun Belt states aren't doing that bad. South Dakota's doing fantastic. And that leads me to a position where I'm like, you know what? I don't know what I'm supposed to say to any of this. But I'm certainly not going to vote for any of these people who try and wink at me and tell me that they're going to support my ideas. Nah, it's okay. I would rather a Republican get in at this point in New York City, and then I will argue to him about certain ways I think we can compromise, and I can get some of what I want. But no way am I going to listen to these Democrat people like DeBlasio, because they've already proven they've destroyed everything. And I'll tell you what, man, I've been watching everything right now with what happened in Portland. This is where I'm being pushed to. You know, I look at the issues that are most important with cities collapsing, with mass rioting, and I'm like, man, if we are going to pull together, because we need our cities, man, we do. I mean, there is remote work right now, but we need our cities to function. If we are going to survive and make it through this and rebuild, then we need to solve the most important issues in front of us. I can sit here and talk to you all day about taxation. I can talk to you about income disparity. I can talk to you about healthcare. But right now, I'm not concerned about those things. You know why? We have more pressing issues. Mass homelessness in the streets. They've failed in these cities. Mass rioting. I'll tell you what. The Democrats are completely unable to help the people who are losing their homes. They're completely unable. They've been unable in California forever before the crisis. We had typhoid and other diseases emerging in California. Now you got what's going on in New York City. Bill DeBlasio's out of his mind. So I say this, you know what? So be it. The most important issue to me right now is the chaos and the riots. And guess who has offered a solution to that? Donald Trump and the Republicans. Now, I think it's very important that anybody does their research on the Republicans, on the Democrats, on their individual candidates. But I'll tell you what, man, when I see ads like, you know, Sean Parnell running for Congress, he puts out an ad where he directly addresses the riots and the chaos. That's my issue right now. They raised the bridges in Chicago and they're doing it for like a week. I grew up there. That's insane. So when I see these politicians ignoring it, when I see the Democratic mayor of Chicago fail, Garcetti threatening to take away rights, Bill DeBlasio, a communist fool, I say this needs to stop. It's not about team politics. I don't care what party you are. Give me a solution. You didn't? I'm voting for somebody else. Right now, one of the biggest complaints many people had about Trump was the way he behaves, the way he talks. Pay attention to the videos, the press conferences over the past several months. He's been really chill about it. I got nothing to complain about. Absolutely nothing. And so I'll tell you this. If Trump came out right now and started spitting and yelling and cussing up a storm, I'd say, yeah, well, are you going to solve the problem of the riots? Okay, then that's it. What do you want me to say? You know, so he's obviously more conservative on tax cuts, on environmental regulations, on abortion issues, things I'm on the left about. But that's not even an issue to me right now. And it's shocking to me when I talk to my friends. They ignore this. Are you watching the world around you unfold and seeing what's happening? Man, it's been crazy with the way the Democrats have run with this crisis has been never let a good crisis go to waste. They have exploited everything, and they're now trying to exploit an election. So when Donald Trump comes out, communist fool, he's ruined the city, I'm like, I mean, he's kind of right. The New York Times wrote about the dude praising the Sandinistas in the past. He's critical of him now, Bill DeBlasio, I mean. And now he's coming out and saying he's a fool who burned this city down. He definitely did. And it's why I'm not there anymore. Look at this. The SBA said, coming from an incompetent mayor who quotes Karl Marx, you question the patriotism of the president. Pay attention to the shootings and murders in your own city. A city that took 30 years to make safe, you destroyed in 30 days. Resign or surrender to the authorities. Whoa. Bold statement from the SBA. They say this. He really is an idiot. He's for funding the post office and defunding the police as people in the city are being gunned down in record numbers. And that's true. That's true. Trump says law and order. If NYC mayor can't do it, we will. I warned of this. I said this was going to happen 2 years ago. Go back and watch my videos. If the far left keeps doing what they're doing, eventually people will stand up and beg Trump for police on the streets. I was right. I was absolutely right. I told you earlier this year, riots happened. I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. I don't think these are hard predictions. I think they're very obvious. I'm not the only one who's noticed these things. And I find myself now here saying, you know what? If the only person offering up law and order is Donald Trump, then I am going to say, I'll take it. You know why? You take a look at what happened in Chicago. Trump said to the mayor, let me give you some federal troops. Why don't you call in the National Guard? And I said, I don't need a lesson from you, Trump. Mass looting, cars crashing into windows, gunshots going off, people dying for nothing, for just people to steal, Trump made the offer. I'm not stupid enough to take a look at somebody who's saying I can deal with these riots and for me to be like, no, I'd rather have the riots. I certainly wouldn't. You have to convince me. You really want me to not support someone, to vote for someone like Trump. You have to convince me the rioters are secretly part of some grand conspiracy to steal my rights. Sorry, Trump did not invade these cities with feds. Bill DeBlasio just screwed everything up, and Trump is standing by. Already today, because of what happened in Portland, many people are calling on Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act. I don't know if it's a good idea, but I'm going to tell you this. Most of my life, I have been rather center-left. I did not vote after Obama because Obama was a liar, just to put it simply, and a bit tyrannical in many ways. And so I'm not going out and voting, but I've absolutely pushed some left-wing policy ideas. Now I'm going to shut up. Now I'm just going to say, okay, you know what? These people who claim to represent this have failed. So I'm going to stand back and say, like any sane, rational person, if I believe I know what's right and I'm going to take charge and I fail, I will pass the torch to somebody else. Like when you've got somebody in charge and they fail, they resign, right? It's kind of like that. This is how it used to be when I played video games with my friends. We'd be like, here, I know how to do this run. Say you're playing a game like Destiny. For those not familiar, it's like a first-person shooter. And I'll be like, here, follow me, and we'll do this. We got to do that, and that. If we die, if we lose, get a game over, whatever, then I'd be like, okay, you take the reins. I mess this one up. Just that simply. That's where I'm at right now. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. This has been crazy. We see the red states are working, the blue states aren't. I'm done. I'm just going to say, okay, you guys do your thing. You guys do your thing, and let's see how it plays out. And if I have a problem with where it goes, then I'll stand up and speak out against it like I do with Democrats. But for now, Trump's right. DeBlasio destroyed this place. I can say it a million times, but I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.